Joining me now from Iurie Roșca's study on the eve of the Chișinău Forum 2023 is Gilles-Emmanuel Jacquet. You live in Geneva now, but you're French, aren't you, originally?
Yeah, and I'm originally from the region close to the border, close to Geneva,
Oh, from the Jura.
from the Haute-Savoie,
Oh,
the
oh,
opposite
Savoy,
side.
you're a Savoyard.
Exactly.
You share roots with Michel Barnier.
Oh, yeah, even though we do not necessarily have the same ideas, yeah.
What brings you here, Gilles? With the other participants, that would be a very vague and open-ended question, and it would be a way of dodging the interview task. But with you, it's worth asking. I have noticed over dinner just now that you know 10 times as much as the rest of us about this part of the former Soviet world on both sides of the river, Romania and Moldova. You know about the Gagauz conflict, Transnistria, the various historical elements of the Romanian ethnic group, what Marx wrote about them. How did you find out all this stuff?
Well, in fact, I met Moldovans when I was younger. I had some Moldovan friends, and I was curious about the country because we didn't hear much about it. When there was a civil war in the Western media, we talked a bit about it, but then it was clearly forgotten. And during my studies, I was curious about the country. I wrote a thesis about the conflict in Transnistria. And in 2009, I had the opportunity to work at the French Cultural Center and the French Embassy as well in Chișinău. So it was a good occasion for me to know the country, to know people, their history, their culture. And then it spurred my interest, especially about not just the country, but the conflict as well. I wrote a book about the conflict in Transnistria.
And it's not Give us the title for French readers.
Oh, yeah, it's Histoire du conflit moldo-transnistrien. And it's not just talking about the conflict and the negotiation process, but it's trying as well to make people understand how and why we had this conflict. But it's not just necessarily like Moldovans against Russians or freedom versus Soviet Union. It was more complex. And so I tried to make people understand what were the causes behind the conflict, and as well what were the negotiation process. They failed more or less. We don't have a political status now for Transnistria. However, we have a political status for Gagauzia. But in the current context with the conflict in Ukraine, the situation became extremely dangerous for Moldova as well. And I hope Moldova will be able to not be dragged into a conflict, because since the war in Transnistria, even though the negotiations failed, we have a sort of understanding between the two sides of the Dniester River. You have businesses operating on both sides of the river, let's say, and you have important companies in Transnistria like Sheriff or Kvint or Aquatir and others who pay the taxes to Chișinău. So it's quite interesting because after a conflict, we still have two parts trying to not find a way out, but to live together with their differences, but at least they're not killing each other.
Is the accusation still well-founded that Transnistria is an arms company with a capital in Tiraspol?
We heard a lot about it, especially in the 2000s. There were some TV reports made by a French journalist, Xavier Deleu, and as well, I think he was a British expert on arms, Brian Johnson Thomas. The issue was mainly related to rumors about factories that could produce weapons. I don't have proofs about it, so I can't say it's true or not. And the other issue was related to the Kobasna arms depot, which is one of the biggest in Europe, and which is in fact posing a threat as well for Transnistria, Ukraine, Moldova, for the whole region, because weapons there are not well maintained or well kept. And God forbid, but if there was an incident there, it would be extremely serious. It could be like a huge explosion, more or less like the kind of explosion we had in Beirut.
Now, for the second half of this interview, we're going to need a visual aid. I'm looking out of shot here at your camera bag. And this is all very impromptu, so I'm not going to take any flack for the quality of audio or video. It's at the behest of our kind host, Iurie Roșca, that I'm doing these interviews, though I wasn't prepared for them. And out of shot, I can see on your camera bag a rather remarkable French flag badge, I beg your pardon. Just show that to the viewers.
Yeah, it's the badge of the Free France, fighting France during the Second World War.
I know it's a very laden term to use in France, but do you regard yourself as a monarchist?
Monarchist, not really. I'm not opposed to monarchy. I would be rather, in a way, a conservative on some, not social issues, but rather societal issues. On social issues, I could be more, I'm not going to say revolutionary or progressive, because now we have different definitions for these terms, but I'm clearly anti-capitalist.
I ask, of course, because that Free French badge is often seen in monarchist circles these days.
Yeah, or what we call in French the souverainist,
Yes,
as well, which is funny because as well in the parts of the nationalist movement there's sometimes a strong opposition to the Gaullists. There is still
the identitarians are quite anti-Gaullist in a way, aren't they?
some of them, yeah, or people who were tied to the to the case of French Algeria, and were not very happy with how it ended and how de Gaulle, in a way, abandoned the Harki, who fought on the side of France. I'm not at the same time taking General de Gaulle as an idol. He was a human being with his limits. We know he did great things for France. He avoided, for example, the establishment of US military government in France. Then there are other issues on which he could be criticized, but views on him changed in the last decades in France. And some people consider, in fact, that Gaullism could be maybe a way for France, or at least what the general did for France. It's not what Macron or other presidents are doing for France, clearly.
You've worked in Catholic journalism. It's a concept that is quite widespread in continental Europe, in the German-speaking and French-speaking countries, for one, not to mention some of the Mediterranean countries. What is distinctive about a Catholic journalist, or as an individual, and of course you're here in a personal capacity as a friend of the region and of the host, and what's distinctive about an agency or an organization that calls itself Catholic?
Well, it means that in a way we are comparing ourselves to other media outlets. I would say that we have the same methodology. We're looking for facts, for proofs, trying to have different points of views being represented. It doesn't mean necessarily that we support points of views, but at least we let people express themselves, which is honestly not really the case now with Western mainstream media. Then clearly, when it comes to some moral issues, let's say, clearly we may not cover these issues as other media would do it. So that's maybe the main difference, but we are not as such. I mean, the media outlets for which I worked, we are not sectarian media groups. We did interviews with Muslim leaders, with Buddhists, with people who are usually concerned as well with contemporary issues and what it means with regard to human beings. So in other words, we try to defend what we would call humanism, more simply, or Christian humanism.
In the minute or so that remains, we're just doing 10-minute slots this evening, what do you regard as being the main theme you're perceiving already among the participants who've arrived the day before the conference? What can we look forward to tomorrow?
Well, we're going to talk obviously about the contemporary world, but more precisely, it will be, I guess, about multipolarity, or the current changing world and world order. But it won't be not just about geopolitics. It will be as well about technology, which is a big issue in the current world we are living, because it's not necessarily technology being understood as a mean to emancipate human beings. We rather now see what could be a sort of modern totalitarianism or slavery. It's a critique, by the way, which is not new. We could hear about that with philosophers like Jacques Ellul, or more radical thinkers like Theodor Kaczynski, for example.
Jacques Ellul was the French Kaczynski, and he was as right as Kaczynski was, wasn't he?
Maybe
in both senses of the word.
Yeah,
right?
Less radical in his practice, or praxis, if I had to say, but quite radical when you really read him in depth, in fact. And he was quite ignored, and it's funny to see now how he's rediscovered.
And famously, he stayed in Bordeaux all his life because he couldn't stand metropolises.
Well,
that's a theme of our host as well here.
Right.
Gilles, thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.